looking to connect a region of over 600 bridges between our lands.
Hello and welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to another hour of the program. We're coming to you live from Manila and Vietnam. Hello, Ralph. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alma. Hello, I'm Ralph Pando of Empire, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. said he will temporarily act as the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture to address the most pressing concerns of the agriculture sector.
There will be an increase.
When asked about addressing the contribution of rising fuel prices and the production cost of food items, Marcos thumbed down the possibility of suspending the excise tax for petroleum products.
And the Department of Trade and Industry remains hopeful that the Senate will concur with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, the ASEAN-led free trade deal with its 5 free trade partners.
A fisherman in the Mekong River in Cambodia has hooked the biggest freshwater fish ever recorded. Scientists said a 300-kilogram stingray.
First in our news, President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. said he will temporarily act as the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture to address the most pressing concerns of the sector. In a press briefing, the incoming leader said the problem in the agriculture sector is severe. Let's listen in.
From the very beginning, I have always said that agriculture is going to be a critical and foundational part of our economic development, or economic transformation, is what I'm calling it, as we anticipate the post-pandemic economy. And as we slowly pull out of the post-pandemic economy, hopefully that will be soon. Furthermore, it is going to be in response to the events in Ukraine, which have affected the Philippines' agriculture and including the food supply in a very serious way. We spoke at length about the measures that we will have to take, because we are forecasting that there will be a shortage, or there will be an increase in food prices in the next quarters that will come, simply because of the outside forces that have been impacting upon food supply, upon supply of feeds. We have been able in the Philippines in the last few weeks to adjust to the new situation in terms of the importations from the Ukraine and from Russia. But these emergency measures that we have taken will not be sufficient for the long run, and that's why we have to plan in a more thorough fashion than just responding. I have asked the DTI, NEDA, and of course the Department of Finance, the DBM. I have asked them all to start to make forecasts. Economic forecast on what it is we think we will have to face for the rest of this year, so that we can prepare and so that we can, despite the fact that there will be some emergency situations, hopefully not, but possibly some emergency situations, especially when it comes to food supply. We have tried to continue the fundamental development when it comes to the economy. As to agriculture, I think that the problem is severe enough that I have decided to take on the portfolio of Secretary of Agriculture, at least for now. And at least until we can reorganize the Department of Agriculture in the way that it will make it ready for the next years to come. Marami tayong mga kailangang palitan, marami tayong mga medyo naging mga iba't ibang opisina na hindi na masyadong nagagamit o kailangan nang i-retool. Many of the agencies have changed their function over the years, and maybe it's time to return them. I talk about the places, organizations like the NFA, the FTI, the Kadiwa, which we have already started to see, especially at the local level. But we have to restructure the actual department so as to be more responsive to the global situation now when it comes to food supply. Para sa post-pandemic, dahil nga iba na yung ating ginagawa ngayon, bumabalik tayo or going back to basics. Ilang beses nyo na sa aking narinig ito, back to basics. We're going back to basics and trying, and we will rebuild the value chain of agriculture. And that is why I thought it's important that the President take that portfolio so that not only to make it clear to everyone what a high priority we put on the agricultural sector, but also as a practical matter so that things move quickly because the events of the global economy are moving very quickly. We have to be able to be agile. We have to be able to respond properly in a measured way as soon as there is a situation that needs to be addressed.
When asked about addressing the contribution of rising fuel prices on the production cost of food items, Marcos thumbed down the possibility of suspending the excise tax for petroleum products. Instead, he said he wants to provide help directly to people whose livelihood were directly affected by the rising pump prices, like transportation sector. Upon starting his term, Marcos said he would fast-track the rollout of the national ID so they could efficiently identify the indigents and other sectors. Let's listen in.
That hits upon, that hits upon the discussion that we have about accelerating the issuance of the national ID. Because right now I think we're up to 12 million. Is that the correct number? Yeah, we're up to 12 million. Excise tax on oil. I prefer to handle the problem on the other side of the equation and provide assistance to those who are in need. Because if you reduce the excise taxes, that does not necessarily help those who are most in need. Yung talagang tinatamaan. Kasi blanket eh. So ang aking iniisip, kung sino yung mga kagad na tinamaan. Example, yung lumabas kagad, mga transport, yung mga nagpapasada, all of that, tinamaan kagad, i-focus natin muna sa kanila. Yung mga nangangailangan talaga. Because, you know, yung namang may kaya, they can afford to pay even the VAT. It's those who whose livelihoods are in danger or in danger of losing their livelihoods because of the increase in the oil. Baka yun ang dapat nating doon tayo mag-focus.
In a related development, sourcing oil from Russia cannot be easily implemented because of technical and diplomatic issues, that according to the Department of Energy yesterday. In a televised interview on Monday, Energy Undersecretary Gerardo Erquiza Jr. disclosed that 2 years ago, the Russian government had already proposed a contract wherein it will deposit crude to the Philippine government. Let's listen in.
About 2 years ago, nagkaroon actually ang offer ng Russia. Meron ng proposed contract po ito, no? At ang sistema ho nila is pagkukuha ng crude nila is magdideposito ang Philippine government, no? Now, itong idea na ito, maganda, pero may tayong operational and tinatawag na diplomatic concerns po. No? Sa operational po kasi, una, pagpapasok ang government, kailangan procurement mo dyan, government to government, pero dapat may available budget. And alam nyo ng budget natin, 1 to 2 years, bago ho yan ma-approve at walang pera, hindi ka naman pwedeng bumili. No? At ang government naman natin, hindi naman nyo pwedeng utusan basta-basta ang private sector. Alam mo natin na nasa private sector ho ang under the regulation law, privado ng may at siyempre may mga kontrata na yan. Long term, hindi pwedeng sabihin ng government, dito kayo kumuha. Meron silang mga commitment na rin. At baka biglang mambitin sila mambibitinin in the future. And thirdly, yung mechanism mo. Kung assuming government din ang kukuha, wala siyang mechanism to distribute. No? Yung dating oil company na pag-aring government Petron nasa private sector na rin. So, bibili ka man, hindi mo rin madidistribute yan sa mga nangangailangan, lalo na sa retail. And lastly, yung diplomatic concern. Alam mo natin sa community of nations, ang Philippines is aligned with countries like the US, sa Europe na talagang very critical doon sa pag-exert, pagbibigay ng sanctions sa Russia because of the, sabi nga, invasion. No? So, pag ginawa ng Philippines yan, of course, they will call, these countries, especially the United States, will call the attention of the Philippines. So, meron tayo talagang diplomatic concerns for dito.
Denmark's energy agency declared a first-level early warning alert over worries of its gas supply due to uncertainty on energy imports from Russia because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. The European Union has established a system to allow member states to flag up impending energy supply difficulties using 3 ascending levels of alerts, beginning with early warning, followed by alert, then emergency. The system allows for mutual assistance from other EU countries, but could also mean a start to rationing supplies. On Monday, the Deputy Director of the Danish Energy Agency, Martin Hansen, issued the first level warning. And I quote, "This is a serious situation we are facing, and it has been exacerbated by the reduction in supplies," unquote, Hansen said in a statement. Currently, Denmark's gas stocks are about 75% full, and gas has been added in recent days, the agency said in a statement. The declaration comes after Danish energy company Ørsted announced at the end of May that delivery of Russian gas to the Scandinavian country would be suspended from June 1st after Ørsted refused to settle the payment in rubles. Gas represents 18% of the energy consumed each year in Denmark. Domestic production accounted for 3/4 of the gas consumed in 2019. Russia is one of the main sources of natural gas imports, according to the Danish Energy Agency.
And now to the battle for Ukraine, which hangs in the far east of the country. Take a look. Towns still controlled by Ukraine. And at the same time, we're hearing about the American vets that were captured in Ukraine while fighting with Kiev's military. Now they are being held by Russia. In an interview with NBC News, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said they were endangering Russian soldiers and they should be held accountable for those crimes. The interview marks the first time the Kremlin has commented on the cases of Alexander Druk and Andy Yun, both U.S. military veterans, according to NBC. It said their soldiers, Mr. Peskov said they're soldiers of fortune and they were involved in illegal activities on the territory of Ukraine. They were involved in firing and shelling our military personnel. They were endangering our lives or their lives, Peskov told the network in English. He also said, quote, they should be held responsible for those crimes that they have committed. He also said that they are not in the Ukrainian army, so they're not subject to the Geneva Conventions. Last week, a Russian state TV channel aired videos on social media of Druk and Yun. The circumstances under which the two men were being held were not fully clear, nor who specifically was holding them. Mr. Peskov would only say they were being held by authorities. Those crimes, he said, have to be investigated. When pressed on what crimes the Americans had committed, Mr. Peskov admitted their specific offenses were not yet known, but claimed that they would not be be covered by the Geneva Conventions on Prisoners of War.
The EU's Foreign Affairs Chief Josep Borrell denounces Russia for sparking the global food crisis and using food as a war arm during a press conference in Luxembourg after meeting with EU Foreign Affairs ministers. Let's listen in.
Russia's blockading Ukrainian exports. Russia, not us. Russia. Russia's destroying ports and destroying food stocks, destroying transport infrastructure. Russia, not us. And that has sparked the global food crisis. When more than 20 million of grains are being blocked in Ukrainian storages, and someone is preventing this food from reaching the consumers, someone will suffer hunger. This is a deliberated attempt to use the food as a war arm. It's a deliberated attempt to create hunger in the world in order to make pressure on the world and on the European Union and on Ukraine. This is what's happening. And the typical playbook of the Russian propaganda, they create a problem and then they blame the others. And they blame the European Union sanctions. They blame the European Union sanctions as the one responsible for this food crisis. It's not our sanctions, it's the Russian actions.
And Moscow's blockade of Ukrainian grain exports and a rail transit row sparked fresh tensions between Russia and the European Union as Kiev warned that Russian troops were intensifying their battle for control of eastern Ukraine. Take a look. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Russia of holding Africa hostage by blocking wheat deliveries, which has spurred food shortages and fears of famines in vulnerable areas and around the world. Russia hit back by blaming soaring grain prices on the West's destructive policies and illegal restrictions imposed since the war began. Nearly 4 months after Russia launched its bloody invasion, President Zelensky said Ukraine was headed into a fateful week with EU leaders set to discuss Kiev's bid to become a candidate for bloc membership on Thursday and Friday. European Council President Charles Michel on Monday invited the bloc's leaders to back granting candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova ahead of the pivotal Brussels summit. President Zelensky warned to expect heavier fighting in the days to come in strategic areas in eastern Ukraine, already under relentless Russian bombardment. Ukraine said Russian troops appeared to be making small gains, including capturing a village near the industrial city of Severodonetsk, a focus of recent fighting.
In other news, Japan and the U.S. showcased their military cooperation during a combat display featuring weapons and assault vehicles as part of the Pacific Amphibious Leaders Symposium 2022, attended by service members from 18 countries. Let's watch this.
The Japanese Ground Defense Force is a close regional ally. And as General Yoshida just mentioned, there is deep trust in this relationship. As you saw today and see behind me, we continue to develop capabilities within this bilateral construct. We continue to advocate as a group for a free and open Indo-Pacific international law and all the things that go into a rule-based relationship.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said on Wednesday that he will attend this month's NATO summit in Madrid, becoming the country's first leader to join a top meeting of the Transatlantic Alliance. The June 2030 gathering is seen as a crunch moment for the 30 North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies, 4 months into Russia's war in Ukraine. Sweden and Finland, which have applied to join NATO, are sending delegations to the summit, and South Korea's new president Yoon Suk-yeol will also be the first leader from his country to attend. Japan, a key U.S. ally and not a NATO member, has delivered defensive supplies to Ukraine and imposed tough sanctions on Russia in tandem with the other group of 7 countries. In recent weeks, Kishida hosted a summit of the Quad grouping and has made trips to countries including Singapore, where he gave a keynote speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue Security Summit on Friday.
In other news, the Myanmar junta's plans to execute political opponents may amount to war crimes or crimes against humanity, according to a UN official. The junta said on June 3 it would execute a former lawmaker from Aung San Suu Kyi's party and a prominent democracy activist, both convicted of terrorism, in what would be the country's first judicial execution since 1990. Let's listen in.
In a recent concerning development, a military spokesperson announced the intention of executing 4 death sentences, including of 2 prominent democracy activists. Myanmar has not carried out court-ordered executions for approximately 30 years. I urgently call on military authorities to refrain from such a regressive step, which would not only violate the right to life, but will further set back prospects for political reconciliation. The people of Myanmar remain trapped in a cycle of poverty and displacement, human rights violations and abuses. What we are witnessing today is the systematic and widespread use of tactics against civilians, in respect of which there are reasonable grounds to believe the commission of crimes against humanity and war crimes.
4 people, including former MP Pyo Zayatao and democracy activist Ko Jimmy, who were sentenced to death, will be hanged according to prison procedures. That was according to junta spokesman Zhao Mintun. Nicholas Kumjian, head of the UN's independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar, said he was following this case closely. He said the available information strongly suggests that under international law, fundamental rights of the convicted persons were blatantly violated in these proceedings. Kumjian said of the trials, which were closed to the public, he also said, quote, imposing a death sentence or even a period of detention on the basis of proceedings that don't satisfy the basic requirements of a fair trial may constitute 1 or more crimes against humanity or war crimes. The junta has sentenced dozens of anti-coup activists to death as part of its crackdown on dissent after seizing power last year. But Myanmar has not carried out an execution for decades.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh staged demonstrations on Sunday, demanding repatriation back to Myanmar, where they fled a brutal military crackdown 5 years ago. Almost 1 million Rohingya are confined to Bangladesh Parliament shacks in 34 squalid camps in southeast Bangladesh with no work, poor sanitation, and little access to education. Their increasingly restrictive host country has banned them from holding rallies since they staged a massive 100,000-strong protest in August 2019. But authorities allowed several groups of Rohingya to hold simultaneous go-home marches and rallies ahead of World Refugee Day on Monday. In 2018, investigators from the United Nations fact-finding mission into the killings and forced mass exodus of Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar concluded that a criminal investigation and prosecution was warranted of top Myanmar generals for crimes against humanity and genocide. Police said thousands of refugees, including young children, joined the marches and rallies, standing on roads and alleys with placards that read, "Enough is enough, let's go home."
When we come back, the Department of Trade and Industry said they are confident that the RCEP will soon be ratified by the Senate. That and more when ASEAN in Focus returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka nang mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Kumanda ka!
Isang sugat mula noon. Nababakas hanggang ngayon. Handog ng Net25. Ang Korean novela na magbibigay pag-asa na maghihilom anumang sugat at ang araw ay muling sisikat. A Place in the Sun. Simula June 27, alas 8 ng gabi. Dito lang sa Net25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's stand together sa Net25.
Welcome back. The news continues here on ASEAN in Focus with Ralph Wandolph Empire from our Vietnam Bureau. Now, here in the Philippines, the Department of Trade and Industry remains hopeful that the Senate will concur with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, the ASEAN-led free trade deal with its 5 free trade partners. After it was ratified by President Duterte in September last year, the Senate's concurrence on RCEP is needed before the country can deposit its instrument of ratification. The country can reap the benefits of the free trade agreement 2 months after depositing the ratification document. Here is DTI Assistant Secretary Alan Gepti.
This is a must for the Philippines. The RCEP region, as the world's largest trading bloc, can become the core economic hub within the Asia-Pacific region. This is an opportunity for the RCEP parties to enhance their respective comparative advantages, not only in the region, but in the global economy. This means more investments in research and development, human capital development, product development, and manufacturing. In the process, the RCEP region can serve as a strong economic bloc that can influence, if not shape, the rules-based system of international trade, not only because of its size and extent of economic activities, but the fact that the levels of development of the RCEP parties varies. By its sheer size alone and the extent of economic activities and opportunities that RCEP brings, the Philippines could not afford not to join RCEP. Let's take some examples in trade and business contexts. RCEP offers cheaper costs because of zero or low tariffs and low administrative costs brought about by simplified trade rules. It will also be convenient to do business and trade because of simplified rules, trade facilitative measures, and other trade enhancement mechanisms. For example, in RCEP, farmers and producers of papaya and durian can now export these products to South Korea at a preferential arrangement. That is from 24% in ASEAN Korea FTA to 0% in 10 years under RCEP. Without RCEP, then their competitors in Malaysia and Thailand will have an advantage because they will be enjoying the said preferential arrangement, while our local farmers and exporters under ASEAN Korea FTA will not be enjoying said benefits. And one important consideration is that there has to be some degree of complementarity among ASEAN member states. Because in reality, while we are one ASEAN, one economic community, the fact remains that in certain areas, we're also competitors. And I think that's one important factor that we have to bear in mind. Now, in the case of the Philippines, our positioning is that one, we would like to see the Philippines as one of the manufacturing hubs in the region. Second is that we want to also push that the Philippines be one of the innovation hubs in the region. And there are many reasons by which we can, of course, excel on this area. That in terms of legal and institutional framework, we have a very strong one. One, we have a robust intellectual property regime. Two, we have competition laws. I would say we're quite advanced compared to other ASEAN member states. Three is that we have the Strategic Management Act and the Strategic Trade Management Office. And in the region, I think we're only three ASEAN member states who have passed that kind of law. And of course, you have noticed that the department, in coordination with other agencies, we have been very aggressive also in pushing our artificial intelligence roadmap, our startup and innovation roadmap. Is that we want to position also the country as the center for training and education in the region. And Australia is one good partner when it comes to education. I think everyone knows that. And this is timely because we just passed also the Transnational Education Act. So basically, in terms of complementation, we have already set the necessary legal and institutional elements by which we can support this agenda. And I think in terms of, I would say, competence, I don't have to explain that. We have very good professionals, teachers, professors. Of course, the facility of English language is one big factor.
Yung nawala po yun.
WTO members successfully concluded the 12th Ministerial Conference, or MC12, in Geneva, securing multilaterally negotiated outcomes on a series of key trade initiatives. WTO members concluded this on June 17. They secured these multilaterally negotiated deals, outcomes on a series of key trade initiatives called the Geneva Package, confirming the historical importance of the multilateral trading system and underlines the important role of the WTO in addressing the world's most pressing issues, especially at a time when global solutions are critical. And these are the details. Let's listen in.
Excellencies, you're not going home empty-handed. The package of agreements you have reached will make a difference to the lives of people around the world. The outcomes demonstrate that the WTO is in fact capable of responding to emergencies of our time. They show the world that WTO members can come together across geopolitical fault lines to address problems of the global commons. In response to the ongoing shocks from COVID-19, the declaration you just adopted will make access to medical supplies and components more predictable in this pandemic and in the next one. The TRIPS waiver compromise will contribute to ongoing efforts to deconcentrate and diversify vaccine manufacturing capacity so that a crisis in one region does not leave others cut off. In response to the worst food security crisis in decades, you have taken steps to make trade in food and agricultural inputs more predictable and hence prices less volatile. On fisheries subsidies, WTO members have for the first time concluded an agreement with environmental sustainability at its heart. This is also about the livelihoods of the 260 million people who depend directly or indirectly on marine fisheries. You have initiated a member-driven process of institutional reform. You recognize the role trade and the WTO can play in empowering women, achieving environmental goals, and expanding opportunities for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises.
This week you have all contributed to making what seemed impossible come to fruition. We have all engaged in frank and sometimes very difficult conversations. We may have not achieved everything that we set out for, but we have delivered. And this is something that all of us should be proud of. Congratulations to you all. Congratulations going beyond your national interests and looking to the common good that the organization itself embodies. I now declare the 12th session of the Ministerial Conference of the World Trade Organization closed.
In today's other news, instead of increasing taxes on mining, President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr. said he is eyeing the collection of value-added taxes from the export of partially processed ore. Marcos also emphasized the need to push for clean mining in the country, citing its negative environmental impact. Again, let's listen in.
Not so that we just increase taxes on mining. What we would like to do is encourage that the value added to the raw ore stay in the Philippines as much as possible. Whether there should be fiscal measures in that regard is something that we haven't quite decided on, and what the levels that will be. But I think what we are trying to achieve, the desired result for all of this is, as I said, that instead of exporting raw ore, we export at least partially processed ore, so that may value added that's left here in the Philippines. The natural resources as a national treasure for which can help the Philippines a great deal. It is only up to us to ensure that the practices that are being that we see in the mining operations around the country are such that they're environmentally neutral. That has not necessarily been the case. I think we are all aware of some of the problems that have arisen before. But again, I cannot believe that here in the Philippines we cannot monitor and regulate the mining industry sufficiently so that we can have clean mining in the country.
In other news, the Department of Health on Monday reported an 82% increase in COVID-19 cases in the country. Health Undersecretary and spokesman Rosario Verger said the National Capital Region or Metro Manila is particularly experiencing a start in the peak in the number of cases, similar to the spikes in September 2021 and January 2022, driven by the Delta and Omicron variants. Let's listen in.
Nakikita natin na patuloy po ang unti-unting pagtaas ng kaso sa iba't ibang bahagi ng bansa. Currently, we are averaging around 350 cases per day nationally, kung saan pag tinignan natin from the previous week, tumaas talaga siya by about 50 to 60%. Dito naman po sa National Capital Region, from the previous week, we were just averaging about 102 cases per day. Ngayon po, we are averaging around 170 cases per day. So pag tinignan ho natin, tuloy-tuloy po ang pagtaas ng mga kaso, albeit medyo mabagal naman po ang pagtaas, pero kailangan lahat tayo cautious. What would be most important right now, minomonitor natin closely ang mga severe and critical cases. Hindi ho natin nakikita na nagkakaroon ng significant increase. Although there are severe and critical cases being reported, pero hindi po siya ganun ka-significant pa sa ngayon. Even our hospitals have only less than 20% admissions, no, yung healthcare utilization. Pero meron na rin ho tayong binabantayan ng mga areas in the country kung saan medyo tumataas po ang kanilang utilization ng kanilang ospital. Hindi ko na muna po babanggitin yung specific, no, but we have areas in the National Capital Region. We also have areas in other areas of the country, no, katulad po sa Region 13 at saka sa Region 4A. Kailangan maintindihan natin, pumasok na po yung mga sub-variants ng Omicron dito sa ating bansa. So we have cases of BA 2.12.1, we have cases of BA 0.4 and BA 0.5. Ito pong mga sub-variants na to, based on evidence and experience around the globe, sila po ay mas transmissible kaysa dun sa original na Omicron. Pangalawa po, nakita na ho natin yung mobility patterns dito po sa buong bansa kung saan parang nasa pre-pandemic level na po tayo. Almost 100% capacity na po lahat ng ating mga sektor and establishments, and that has contributed, no, na mas mabilis po yung nagiging transmission ng sakit. Pangatlo, nakikita ho natin, and it is part of the projections of the department with our experts, we are already having waning immunity because of the slow uptake of boosters. So ang pinaka-importante po talaga para sa ating population would be for us to receive boosters. Pag tinignan ho natin ang ating mga metrics, no, we will be escalated to alert level 2 or yung moderate risk nga na klasifikasyon kapag ka ang atin pong average daily attack rate, no, or yung mga new cases in an area would be more than 6, no, per 100,000 population. Pag tinignan ho natin yan, kailangan nagkakaroon tayo ng kaso dito sa National Capital Region ng around 800 cases per day. Malayo pa naman tayo, pero nakikita natin po kasi na unti-unting tumataas. So kailangan cautious tayo. We also have these metrics, healthcare utilization, na kahit po mababa ang kaso, pero kapag ka tumaas na to moderate risk, ibig sabihin more than 50% na po ang atin pong naia-admit sa ating mga ospital, at maaari po nating itaas ang alert level dahil kailangan natin iputulin po, no, or to prevent, no, yung ating healthcare system to be overwhelmed. So sa ngayon, hindi pa naman natin nakikita, although sabi ko nga, may mga binabantayan na tayong mga ospital dito sa National Capital Region. The key for us to prevent this to happen is sumunod tayo lahat sa minimum public health standards. Kapag may sakit tayo, isolate at once. At pangatlo, kailangan magpabakuna na po tayo.
Thailand has scrapped the use of masks outdoors, but as the pandemic has subsided, the tourism-dependent kingdom has gradually also relaxed COVID restrictions in a bid to boost visitor numbers. On July 1, the government will also end the Thailand Pass system, under which foreign tourists had to register and show proof of vaccination and health insurance before they could fly to the kingdom. Wearing of masks outside would become voluntary, but was still recommended in crowded areas, entertainment venues, and on public transport. Let's listen in.
So, for example, vulnerable groups or those in the 608 group who are not fully vaccinated, for some, are highly encouraged to wear masks when present with others. COVID-infected and high-risk groups are also strongly suggested to always wear masks when with others. Outside of buildings, wearing masks when you are with others and cannot observe social distancing, this is recommended, or when the area is crowded with a lot of people or not well ventilated. This is the case if you are using public transportation, for instance, or in congested markets, sport venues, and concert arenas. Another exciting update I have for our listeners at home regards Thailand Pass. And here we do have an effective date, which is the 1st of July onwards. The CCSA this morning agreed to discontinue or lift Thailand Pass registration for all travelers, both Thais and foreigners. This is surely welcome news for everyone listening today and at home, and we do hope that it will promote tourism, facilitate international travels and arrivals, and bring us closer to normalcy. What this means in specific terms is that the current $10,000 insurance requirement for COVID treatment for foreign travelers will no longer be mandatory. But certainly it's highly recommended considering the 3 difficult years that we have just gone through. Secondly, what lifting the Thailand Pass registration means is that travelers still need to show proof of either a vaccine certificate or COVID-free test results. So that vaccine certificate or pro-ATK or RT-PCR results taken within 72 hours of travel will be checked by the airline staff at check-in and once again when travelers arrive in Thailand. But you will no longer have to upload this to the Thailand Pass, which will be discontinued. Please note that this new Thailand Pass discontinuation will be effective from the 1st of July onwards.
Thailand's relaxation of face masks comes after similar moves by regional peers, including Cambodia and Singapore.
Quang Ninh, home to Halong Bay, is scheduled to receive nearly 190 South Korean tourists arriving by charter flights next month. The visitors will play golf, visit UNESCO Heritage Site, Halong Bay and Sun World, Halong Entertainment Complex, and explore some other tourist attractions. They are booked to travel with Good Feeling Vietnam. They will be among the first foreign golf visitors to the northern province since Vietnam reopened its doors to tourists on March 15 and South Korea eased immigration procedures recently. A representative of the company said it would bring more South Korean tourists to Quang Ninh in the 3rd and 4th quarters. Quang Ninh hopes to attract 10 million tourists, including 1.6 million foreigners this year. Also on March 15, the government scrapped quarantine requirements and reinstated visa waiver for the citizens of 24 countries, including Japan and South Korea. It has also removed most other requirements like COVID tests and medical declarations.
President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. said he wants Vice President and incoming Department of Education Sara Duterte to look after the welfare of the country's teachers. Marcos made this remark after Duterte revealed that the incoming president instructed her to review the implementation of the country's K-12 program. Let's listen in.
And many of the other issues, ang aking laging pinapaalala sa kanya is yung mga teacher. Kailangan alalayan ng mga teacher, kailangan i-training ang mga teacher para magandang maging trabaho nila. Ang mga teacher naman, yan ang pinakamadaling turuan, yung teacher. So I'm very confident that as long as we have a program in place to support our teachers, not only in terms of their benefits, but of course that's an important part of it. But not only just in terms of their benefits, but also in terms of other support, in terms of retraining, in terms of the supplies, the equipment. We have to do a lot to recover our very good grading before. Pagka tayo tinitingnan ng Asia, yung literacy rate, yung pagsalita ng English, pati sa science, sa math, mataas tayo noon eh. Kailangan natin balikan yan. Mahirap mag-compete kung hindi natin ayusin yung training ng mga kabataan natin.
In other news, at least 26 more people have died in monsoon flooding and lightning strikes in India, as millions remain marooned in the country and neighboring Bangladesh, authorities said on Monday. Floods are a regular menace in India and Bangladesh, but experts say climate change is increasing their frequency, ferocity, and unpredictability for the two countries of 1.6 billion people. In India's northeastern state of Assam, 3 people were killed in landslides while 6 others died in floodwaters, disaster management authorities said. In the eastern state of Bihar, lightning triggered by storms killed at least 17 people, according to local disaster management minister Renu Devi. Assam continued to reel under severe flooding with 5,140 villages across the state's 33 districts submerged by surging waters. More than 100,000 villagers are taking refuge in relief shelters. The state was first hit in April when pre-monsoon rains arrived, causing floods that killed 44 people.
And as mentioned, at least 26 more people have died in monsoon flooding and lightning strikes in India as millions remain marooned in the country and neighboring Bangladesh. Monsoon seasonal downpours occur in many parts of the world in countries close to the equator, especially in Southeast Asia. Take a look.
Monsoons, seasonal downpours, occur in many parts of the world in countries close to the equator. But the best-known monsoon, due to its intensity and impact on people's livelihoods, occurs each year in South Asia. It runs between May and September. As summer approaches, heat builds over the land in the Indian subcontinent. Sea temperature around the landmass, meanwhile, is much cooler. Warm air is less dense than cold air, so when heat over the subcontinent rises, air rises too, creating a vast area of low pressure. Over India, this causes wind direction to swing dramatically from the northeast to the southwest. Wind from the southwest, generated by high pressure in the Indian Ocean, then rushes in and fills the void left by the low pressure area. As it's full of moisture, it unleashes relentless rain over the land. Climate change, global warming, changes in land use and pollution can all affect the rainy season. Even dust from North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, which heats up the air, can play a role, making it even more intense. The monsoon is vital to the lives of hundreds of millions of people. India gets 80% of its precipitation from the monsoon. More than half of India's farms lack irrigation, so they depend almost entirely on the annual rains. But monsoon rains can also bring devastation and misery to hundreds of thousands of people through flooding, mudslides, and collapsed buildings.
River in Cambodia has hooked the biggest freshwater fish ever recorded. Scientists said a 300-kilogram stingray. The giant freshwater stingray, which measured 4 meters or 13 feet from snout to tail, was caught last week and released back into the wild after being fitted with a tag to track its behavior. The monstrous bottom dweller beat the previous record for biggest recorded freshwater fish, held by 223 kilo or 646 pound Mekong giant catfish caught in Thailand in 2005. The U.S.-funded Wonders of the Mekong Research Project said. The stingray, experts said, caught in Stong Trang province in northern Cambodia, was more than twice the weight of an average lowland gorilla. The researchers fitted an acoustic tag to the stingray before returning it to the river to try to learn more about the secretive creature's elusive behavior. Last month, an endangered giant freshwater stingray 4 meters long and weighing 180 kilos was also hooked by a fisherman in the same province.
That's a very big stingray. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. And thank you, Ralph, for keeping me company here on ASEAN in Focus. Thank you very much, Ralph.
It's always a pleasure, Alma. And that's the latest news around the ASEAN region. Thank you for watching. Once again, this is Ralph One Love Empire from EBC Vietnam Bureau.
And I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back tomorrow, same time, same place here on ASEAN in Focus. Have a good day.